The first time I knew the HOA had declared war on me. Wasn't a knock at the door, it was a letter. I found it one quiet morning, half tucked under the welcome mat, a thick white envelope, stamped in bold block letters, notice of violation, inside. A single sheet of paper, threats dressed up as official language. They told me I had 30 days to remove the unauthorized solar installation from my property, or face daily fines of $200, escalating to legal action for putting solar panels on my own damn roof. I remember staring at that paper, my hands tightening around it, and right then I knew retirement wasn't going to be peaceful, it was going to be a fight. But to understand how I got there, how a man who spent 25 years running into burning buildings ended up battling his own neighborhood, we have to rewind back to when I first arrived here, believing this place would finally give me peace. They say retirement is supposed to be simple, a time to slow down, to sip coffee on the porch, to finally breathe after decades of work. For me, that work was firefighting. 25 years in the department. 25 years of smoke, flames, adrenaline. I saw families lose everything in minutes. I held people's hands when help wasn't coming fast enough. And when I finally hung up that helmet, I made myself a promise. I'd build a quieter life. That's how I landed here. In this picture-perfect suburban neighborhood. Cookie-cutter houses lined up like soldiers, lawns so uniform. They looked copy-pasted at first glance. Perfect. Safe. Predictable. I thought I'd earned that piece. But here's the thing. Danger doesn't always roar with flames and smoke. Sometimes it smiles politely, hands you a basket of cookies, and hides behind a stack of bylaws thicker than a Bible, asterisk around here. That danger had 3 letters, HO at first. I didn't pay them much mind. The president, Karen, showed up at my door with a welcome basket store-bought cookies, a binder of rules, and a smile so polished it could have been rehearsed in a mirror. I laughed at the rules, mailboxes, flower colors, even what kind of grass you could plant. I tossed the binder on the counter and thought, at least someone cares about the neighborhood. But the neighbors, they acted different around her. Whenever Karen walked by, conversation stopped. I even heard one guy whisper, "Careful with her, she doesn't like surprises." I laughed it off. What's the worst an HOA president could do? But retirement doesn't erase the instincts you build. And mine told me one thing: you can't depend on others to save you. That's why I went solar, not to rebel, not to show off, but because I knew when things go wrong, you need to be ready. Power outages, storms, emergencies. With solar and batteries, I could keep my lights on. While the block scrambled for candles and water, I set up tanks, rain collection. Preparedness, not paranoia. A firefighter's instinct carried into retirement. The first few months were calm, coffee on the porch, barbecues with neighbors, even laughter, but that calm didn't last the moment the solar panels went up, the moment that work truck pulled into my driveway. Karen's smile changed, and not long after, that envelope appeared beneath my doormat, a simple piece of paper, a few typed sentences, and a warning that the quiet life I'd worked for was about to be set on fire in a very different way. The day the solar panels went up, you'd have thought I'd parked a UFO on my roof. Trucks rolled in early, ladders clanging, workers moving like a pit crew. By noon, black glass stretched across my shingles, gleaming in the sun. To me, it was beautiful. The beginning of freedom, but to my neighbors, you'd think I'd spray-painted the house neon pink. I caught them staring, arms crossed, whispers drifting across hedges. One man even paused his lawnmower just to glare, like I'd insulted his grass and then their Waskarin. HOA President, clipboard in hand, standing at the curb like she was inspecting a crime scene. She didn't walk up my driveway. She didn't have to. Her face said everything. This isn't over, you need to understand. I didn't jump into this lightly. I spent months researching, talking to contractors, running the numbers. With my pension, I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broke either. If I invested in something, it had to matter. Solar made sense. Not just for the environment, for independence, for the storms, for the blackouts. I'd seen families trapped in darkness, food spoiling, medical equipment shutting down. Silence except for panic. I wanted my home to be different. I wanted to know I could keep going no matter what. The first night after the panels went live, I sat in my living room with one lamp glowing. The neighborhood was dark, sleeping. I was awake, watching the power monitor, watching the sun fuel my home, that feeling freedom, safety, control. For the first time in months, I slept easy. Peace didn't last. 3 days later, Karen was at my door, clipboard, sharp smile, words dipped in sugar. "We've had some concerns," she said. "The panels don't align with the community's aesthetic guidelines. They create a visual disruption." Aesthetic guidelines. Visual disruption? I almost laughed. These weren't neon billboards. They were black, sleek, cleaner than most roofs. Here, Buckran didn't care about looks. This was about control. She handed me a letter, typed, formal, threatening fines. The HOA had already voted. The panels had to come down. I looked her in the eye. "With all due respect, Karen, the sun doesn't belong to the HOA." Her smile never cracked. "We'll see about that." The letters kept coming. Neighbors I'd joked with weeks before turned cold. I waved. They turned away. Whispers followed me down the street. Someone even left a copy of the HOA rulebook in my mailbox. Pages highlighted. Sticky notes plastered like a warning. One night I came home to footprints in the mulch beneath the panels. Mud across the flower bed. Too close? Next morning, one panel. Mount was loose, not broken, just tampered with. Enough to send a message. That's when I knew. This wasn't paperwork. This was intimidation. But I'd stood inside burning buildings with the ceiling collapsing over my head. Clipboards and gossip wouldn't scare me. Still, I wasn't reckless. I documented everything, every letter, every conversation. Even the footprints detailed, careful, the way I used to write incident reports on the job, because I knew it would escalate. And I'd need proof, but the fines stacked anyway. $200 a day. Each one added like a brick, building a wall designed to crush me. And Karen didn't stop with me. I overheard her telling a neighbor, "If we let him get away with this, everyone will want panels. The whole neighborhood will look like a junkyard." A junkyard. That's what she called renewable energy. The breaking point came a month after. Installation, the HOA special meeting at the clubhouse. The notice was blunt, homeowner. Violation, solar panels. I showed up, sat at the back. Listened to Karen and her board. Rattled off my supposed crimes, unauthorized, disruptive, precedent, violation. They made me sound like a criminal. Like I'd poisoned the community. Finally, I stood. "All I've done is put panels on my roof to power my home. I've hurt no one. I've broken no law. And if you think fines are going to scare me, you don't know who you're dealing with." The room froze. Neighbors shifted in their seats. Some uncomfortable, some almost respectful. Karen just stared. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. Like a cat watching a mouse make it stand. That's when I knew. The fight had only just begun. If the solar panels shook them this much, wait until they saw the rainwater tanks I was planning. That battle was coming sooner than I thought. The tanks arrived on a Tuesday, 3 of them. Big, round, dark green giants that looked like something you'd see behind a farm. Instead of in a suburban backyard, I remember standing in the driveway when the delivery truck pulled up. The driver climbed out, checked his clipboard, and asked if I was sure about this. I just smiled. "More sure than you know." He shook his head, muttering something about HOA nightmares, but I didn't care. To me, those tanks weren't just plastic containers. They were security. They were life. I'd spent too many years watching water lines snap during storms, watching families scramble for bottled water when the taps ran dry. To me, harvesting rain wasn't strange. It was common sense, but in a place like this, a neighborhood that prided itself on perfect symmetry, lawns clipped to an inch, driveways scrubbed clean, trash bins hidden like state secrets. Those tanks were the equivalent of planting a flag in the middle of enemy territory by the time the crew rolled them into my backyard. I could feel eyes on me. Curtains shifting, a door opening. Neighbors watching, whispering, and sure enough, there she was. Karen, clipboard tucked under her arm. designer sunglasses on, her heels clicking as she strode down the sidewalk like a sheriff arriving at a crime scene. She didn't say a word at first. Just stood there at the edge of my property, head tilted, lips pressed into a line so thin it practically disappeared. Finally, she called out, "What exactly do you think you're doing, Daniel?" I wiped the sweat from my forehead and walked over, calm as I could be, collecting rain. Last I checked, the sky's still free. Her jaw tightened. This is a residential community, not a farm. Those tanks are unsightly. They disrupt the uniformity of the neighborhood. Unsightly? I asked. They're in the backyard. You'd need binoculars to even notice them. Be that as it may, she said, pulling her clipboard like it was a weapon. They are not in alignment with the aesthetic standards set forth by the Homeowners Association. There it was again, that word. Aesthetic, like beauty was. Something she could trademark and enforce with fines. I leaned against the fence, staring her down. Karen, let me make something clear. I'm not putting neon lights on my roof. I'm not painting my house purple. I'm collecting rainwater, quietly, responsibly. And if that's your definition of chaos, then maybe the problem isn't me, she. Gave me a smile. One of those fake, glossy smiles that didn't reach her eyes. You'll be hearing from us soon. And then she walked off, heels clicking. Like the verdict had already been written, it didn't take long. 2 days later, another. Envelope under my door. Notice of violation, same bold block letters. This one claimed my tanks were a clear violation of community design guidelines and posed potential environmental hazards. Environmental hazards. For catching rain, I almost laughed out loud. I'd spent years walking into burning buildings, watching smoke choke the sky, and this woman wanted to convince me that saving water from the clouds was dangerous. The fines started piling on again, $200 a day. Like clockwork, but this time something shifted. Neighbors started to get curious, not everyone, but a few. One evening, a man named Lawson, mid-40s, works construction, wandered over while I was hooking up a gutter line to the tanks. You really think this stuff works? He asked. Works better than you'd imagine, I told him. Every storm that comes through, these fill up. That's water you don't have to pay for, water you can drink if you filter it. Water that doesn't vanish when the grid screws. Up, he scratched his chin. Karen's gonna lose her mind. Already has, I said, he laughed, and for the first time, I saw something dangerous in this neighborhood. Possibility. If one man started thinking, more would follow, and Karen, she must have felt it too. Because that's when the intimidation really kicked in. It started small, footsteps by the fence at night. Car headlights lingering outside my house longer than normal. Whispers that cut off when I stepped outside one morning. I found a rock in my driveway. Taped to it was a note. This isn't your land. Follow the rules. I held that rock in my hand for a long time. Not because it scared me, but because it told me I was right. They weren't just annoyed. They were threatened. Still, I played it smart. Documented everything. Dates, times, letters, even that damn rock. My old firefighter instincts kicked in. You don't survive chaos by being careless. You survive by being prepared. The turning point came at another board meeting. They'd called it specifically to address what they labeled the water issue. I sat in the back again, quiet, listening as Karen and her allies painted me as a menace, unsanitary storage. Devaluing property, a dangerous precedent. They tossed those words around like grenades. Finally, I stood, slowly, calmly. My whole career, I said, voice steady, was about protecting people. From fire, from disaster, from the things no one thinks will ever happen until they do. And what I've done here is solar panels, rainwater tanks. It's not rebellion, it's responsibility. It's the same thing I've done my whole life. Making sure when things go wrong, people survive. Some faces in the crowd softened, not many, but enough. I saw neighbors shifting in their seats, looking at me instead of her, but Karen? She didn't blink. She just leaned forward, her smile razor sharp. This isn't about survival, Daniel. This is about order. And in this community, order is not optional. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to stop. Not with letters, not with meetings. Not with fines, this was war, and I wasn't backing down. By the time autumn rolled in, the neighborhood wasn't just watching me anymore, they were choosing sides. Some mornings I'd catch a nod from Lawson across the street. Subtle, quick, but real. Other days I'd see neighbors whispering on the sidewalk, glancing my way like I was some kind of outlaw folk hero, or maybe just a fool dragging them all into trouble. But the truth was, the fight over solar panels and rain tanks wasn't just about me anymore. It was spreading. Few people started asking quiet questions. How much did the panels really save? Did the tanks actually work? Would the fines stick if we fought them? And every one of those questions was gasoline on the fire burning inside Karen. She hated questions. Questions meant cracks in her control. The first open confrontation came on a Saturday morning. I was tightening the gutter line into the tanks when I heard raised voices out front. When I rounded the corner, I saw Karen standing in the street, clipboard in hand. Her voice sharp as broken glass. Across from her stood Lawson. His arms were crossed, his face red, and for once, he wasn't letting her steamroll him. "You can't tell me what I put in my own backyard," he shouted. "If Daniel can have tanks, I'll damn well get some too." Karen's smile didn't budge. "Daniel isn't allowed tanks either, Lawson. He's in violation. And if you follow his example, you'll face the same fines." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "You're bleeding people dry with those fines, Karen. This isn't leadership, it's a shakedown." Neighbors were gathering now. Porch doors opening, kids tugged inside, people lingering with folded arms, pretending not to listen. But every eye was on them. I thought Karen might back down, soften her tone. But she didn't. She leaned forward, her sunglasses reflecting Lawson's scowl. "If you don't like the rules, Lawson, you're free to move." The air went still. Even the breeze seemed to stop. Lawson spat on the pavement, shook his head, and walked off without another word. Karen turned slowly, catching sight of me at the edge of my driveway. Her lips curled into that same thin smile she'd given me 100 times before, and in that smile, I saw something new. Fear. That week, the letters escalated. Not just to me, but to Lawson too. And then to 2 other neighbors who'd asked me about solar. Karen wasn't just coming after me anymore. She was cutting off any spark of resistance before it could spread. But here's the thing about fire. Once it catches, you can't unburn the wood. The storm broke at the monthly HOA meeting. The clubhouse was packed tighter than I'd ever seen. Folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors standing in the back. Karen sat at the head table, her board flanking her like loyal soldiers. I sat near the middle, hands clasped, waiting. She started the meeting with her usual theatrics reading. Off violations, fines, announcements. Her voice rang with authority, polished, rehearsed. And then, as if it were just another item on the agenda, she said, "The board has voted unanimously that Mr. Daniel Thompson's solar panels and rainwater tanks must be removed within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action." The room buzzed with whispers, a few gasps, some smirks. I stood. My chair scraped the floor, the sound loud enough to cut the murmurs short. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, steady but firm, "I've listened long enough. I've sat through every one of these meetings while Karen paints me as some kind of criminal for daring to use sunlight and rain, but let me remind you, neither of those belong to the HOA. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Karen's face stayed stone. "I've paid every fine. I've documented every threat. I've played by the rules even as those rules were bent against me. But there comes a point where you stop bowing your head and you start standing tall. And I'm telling you now, this is that point." Someone in the back clapped. Just once. Then another joined in. Then more than a roar. Not yet. But it was enough to rattle the cage Karen had built. Her voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Order! This is a homeowners association meeting, not a circus." But the room didn't quiet as quickly as it used to. People were restless, eyes shifting, some siding with her, some with me. That's when I realized the neighborhood was dividing. That night, I sat in my living room, lamp glowing beside me, notebook open. I wrote everything down, the meeting, the words, the applause, Even the looks on people's faces, because this wasn't just about fines anymore. This was heading towards something bigger. Something messier. I thought back to my firefighting days, to the moments before a building collapsed. You could feel it in the air, the tension, the groan of stressed beams, the crackle of fire chewing through support. And you knew when it gave, it was going to come down hard. That's what the neighborhood felt like now. A house about to collapse. And Karen was still pouring gasoline on the floor. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the opening round of a fight that was about to consume the whole neighborhood. And when the dust settles, not everyone will be standing on the same side. The battle begins in part 2. If you don't want to miss what happens next, the betrayals, the confrontations, and the fallout, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.